testing for Blender beginners, basic UI tools, and hotkeys. Alright, so first up I will be going through the basic UI hotkeys. I'm going to put them up on screen, and then I'm going to put them away and then put them up at the end of the video. So here you can pause the video and write these down, or I can also put them in the description of the video. So there, that is what we'll be doing basically. So first up is talking about the scene. So this is the 3D view of the scene. Here is your hierarchy. It starts with a camera, a basic cube, and a lamp, basic light source. So my recommendation for all these would be to rename them so that they go in the order. Now this doesn't really matter when you have 3 objects, but when you have, I don't know, 30 or 40 objects, it is very nice to have an organized hierarchy, because then you can find things easily. So first up, also from the hierarchy you can change what is viewable, also what is selectable. Now I can't actually select the cube, even though I can select these. Alright, so let's select the cube. You'll notice that we have a red arrow, a green arrow, and a blue arrow. These correspond to these 3 in the bottom. Red X, Y Z, blue Z, Y green. Yeah. We'll notice that other 3D programs, most programs actually, use Y for their up and down. Blender is different in that it uses Z as their up and down. I don't know why. Alright. So, here's your basic cube. If you want to add things to it, add new things to the scene, you can either go add, and you have a group of things. I would recommend just using, for the most part, as a beginner, in mesh and using its top parts, starting with cubes and planes and cylinders. So the way that I am manipulating the view is I am holding middle mouse button down, which by the way you can see everything here. If I want to pan around, I hold shift and I hit the middle mouse button. And if I want to scroll, I just zoom in and out with my middle mouse button, wheel it in and out. Now let's say I get all the way over here and I can't find anything. I just select whatever I want, and you hit Numpad. You hit the period on your Numpad, and it zooms to whatever you have selected. Yeah, sorry, you'll notice that actually, if I'm in here and not in the 3D view, when I hit period, like if I'm selected in here, it should do it. Let's see. Yeah. So here I'm doing it, but it's not, because the hotkeys are different for different parts of the UI, which is strange at first, but it ends up reasonably working out. Alright, so on the Numpad as well, you have Numpad 5, which is from orthographic to perspective. The main difference between these two is that in orthographic, there is no depth, I believe. So perspective is this, with depth, that's what a normal view would look like if you were just looking at this. Orthographic is with absolutely no depth. This is very useful if you want to use any of the other Numpad hotkeys, like this goes to front. If I press Numpad 1, I can go to orthographic. Notice that it's different from perspective. Orthographic is usually what you're going to want to use using some of these top view and front views because it's going to give you the best result for what you're working with. Some other things are switching between shaded or wireframe, simply with Z, and then tab switches into edit mode for objects. We'll be talking about that very soon. Alright, so I would recommend first things first is go into your user preferences by file and then switch. It's going to come default on right. I would highly recommend switching it to use left because that's what every other 3D modeling program uses, and actually what every other program at all uses on the computer, almost always. So yeah. Then if you do that, then the right mouse button changes where the 3D cursor is. So you'll notice that anything new, the 3D cursor is used for a lot of things, but the biggest one that you're going to learn now is that it's where new objects spawn. So let's undo that by hitting Ctrl Z. And then if you want to deselect or select everything in the scene, you hit A. And likewise, if you're in edit mode, I just hit tab. You can also go down here and go into edit mode. If I hit A, it deselects, and then I can hit everything again. Then hit tab again to get out. Alright, so let's go into edit mode, and we are going to learn about different types of selecting. So you have selecting one at a time, or you can select one, hold down shift, and select another. Now I have all four. Notice how the face and all the edges between it line up. Now, currently I'm in the vertex mode. Now, what if I wanted to actually select these edges? I'm going to hold down Control and Tab, and it's going to come up with this UI mesh select mode. So I can either go vertex, stay in vertex, or I can go edge mode. I can select different edges, or I can go face mode, select whole faces. So, let's say we want to select everything in a box. I would hit B and come up with this up and down arrow, and it gets both of those that are in the that box. I can also do C, and I get a circle select. Notice how it's not getting the ones behind it. We can change that if we want by hitting this button right here, limit selection to visible. Check that off, then we can see all the way around, and we can select behind it as well. This also works for box select and for just normal selecting. Notice that you can also increase the range of the circle select if you want to be very close for some times that you would want that. Make it very close or not. Alright, another thing is, let's swap back out into object mode by hitting tab again. Let's say we want to have two objects. We're going to do shift D, and then we can just move this anywhere. But what if we want to constrain it to an axis? Let's take that away. So notice how these are, if you pull on one of these are only going in one direction. If we hit shift D, it goes in all directions. But if we hit Z for going in the Z direction, notice on the bottom left, over here, it is constrained to the Z direction. For X, let's actually delete that, yeah. Let's shift D again, hit X, it only goes in that direction. So that also works if you just hit G, which is the hotkey for moving. You can move it in all directions, but let's say we want to do it in Y. Or what if we want to do it in everything but Y? Then we do Shift, and then, sorry, we do G and then Shift Y. And notice how it goes along the X and the Z axes, but not along the Y axis. So again, moving, the hotkey is G, and if you want to do one axis, you just hit the axis that it is, so X. If you want to do it for two axes, so not one of the axes, then you just hold down Shift after hitting G, and maybe hit Z. So now I can only do it on X and Y axes. The next one is rotate. Blender is not great in how it handles rotations, in my opinion, compared to other 3D modeling programs, but it works for the most part. So it's not really useful like this. Really isn't. The only time that without constraining it would be useful is if you're in front view, because then it only goes around whatever axis is not shown. So in this case, it would be the Y. So again, to get to front orthographic view, which I just did quickly, sorry about that, I did 5 on the numpad and then 1 on the numpad. 5 switches from orthographic and perspective, and then 1 goes to front view. Alright, so I can hit R for rotate, and then let's say I want it constrained around the X axis. I can just hit X, and now it's only spinning around that red axis. I can also do it for everything but the X, which also does seem to only do it for the X. That's great. Again, Blender is not that great at some things that other 3D modeling programs have, but Blender is free. So let's say we just want to do it around the Y-axis. That is possible. And Z-axis, also possible. Alright. Then the third basic way to manipulate objects is by hitting the S key, which is for scale. Now, you can do normal scale, or you can hit S, and you can only do it on the Z-axis. Notice how my mouse is going from one end of the screen and then flipping to the other. That is a handy thing that Blender has that allows you to quickly make ridiculously long things, but it's also just useful for moving things. It's pretty useful. Okay, so we can also, if we want to scale it slower, we hit Shift, and that's much slower than that. Notice I'm holding Shift down, or we can hit Control after hitting Shift, and it is on increments. So you can get reasonably precise increments. You can also do that with the what's it called? The Z, or the movement on G and the rotation on R. So like, let's say I have this, I'm also holding down Shift now. It goes much slower. I can also, let's say, rotate. I hold down Control. It is going on set intervals. Let's say I hold down, I hit Y on R, and then I'm also holding Control. You can get pretty accurate with that. Alright, but let's add some more dimension to this cube. So, actually before that, real quick, you'll notice that if I scale it up, the scale on the side changes to however much I scaled it by. One real quick thing that you're always going to want to remember to do is if you scale it in object mode, hit Ctrl A, and apply scale. If you do it in edit mode, you don't really have to. You don't have to. Notice how it's still 1. But if you're in object mode and you scale it, make sure to hit Ctrl A and scale. Alright, so let's say we want to extrude a face. Now extruding is basically it's a simple way for how to create more geometry. So let's take this one and we're just gonna go hit E for extrude and you pull it up. Notice how it's different from just pulling it up normally. Hit E, you pull it up, and now there is another edge loop, which means that you can do things like this rather than just going like that. Do it again, and then I'm also going to grab this side and show. So that's, instead of that, we have this. Like that. Pretty simple. You can also extrude edges. So let's extrude this edge. Maybe we want to constrain it to the y-axis. So now we can bring that up, Z, and you can just hit whatever you think, whatever you need with that. Extruding is very handy. What else? Okay, yeah. Let's say you select a face. Another useful tool is I for inset. Inset is only in edit mode, as is extrude. Inset creates a face with 4 faces around it. Now this is very good because of a thing just basically in 3D modeling where you want to keep quads, which is, let me swap over to vertex mode, faces, so one solid face made up of different connected edges, which are thusly connected vertices. So a quad is a 4 vertex and 4 edge face. You don't want things that aren't quads because that will make rendering and texturing a little more complex. Won't be as easy. Also, it just won't get as good from my experience. Alright, and then one more basic tool that I will close up on is the insert edge loop, which is what it's called in other what's it called in other programs. I'm not sure what it's called in Blender, but it doesn't really matter. You hit Ctrl R, and you'll notice that there's a pink line that goes around your object, and if you move it, it's always gonna go on whatever edge you're nearby. It's gonna go in the middle of that. So let's say I go here, middle of here, in the middle of this edge. I click it, and I can actually move it. But let's say I didn't want it in the middle. That looks weird. You just want to click it immediately after hitting it. So it's a process of multiple clicks. Well, let's do that again. Hit Ctrl R. I choose the edge that I want it on, and I can click. If I don't want it to move around, I need to click again. Now, you can also add more than that. Let's say I want to add, I don't know, let's say however much, 3, 4, 5. 5 sounds right. So, the benefit of adding more and just adding edge loops in general is they increase how many vertices you have, and that in turn increases how much depth you can have. essentially. So let's say I want to make this more rounded because it's just a solid cube now. I can go to front ortho view by again hitting F5, or sorry, Numpad 5, and then Numpad 1 for front. I'm going to select these, and maybe I'm going to scale them out on every axis except Z. So I hit S and Z, and I'm scaling it around, and maybe I don't want to scale these upper two, and I just want to scale these, let me turn off this for a sec. I just want to scale these middle 3 edge loops. If I want to select an entire edge loop, I hit Ctrl left click. Sometimes it doesn't get the edge loop you wanted. Let's see if it's going to do it. Sorry. I'll have to change that in the notes. It is Alt left click. I'm kind of used to Maya. Okay, so yeah, Alt left click selects an edge loop, which notice it gets everything around. It may not look very important, but trust me, it is. So then if you want to select more, you hit Shift and Alt, just like any other thing that you want to select more of. After you select the first one, just hold down Shift, and then let's try scaling this around in everything but Z. Alright, and then let's do the last one. We'll go inwards. You've just made a super basic shape. And maybe, I don't know. Alright, with that, the last thing on my list is to delete. You hit X to delete. Closing it up now.